first emotion, I think, was shock because you never think it'll be you. It's always somebody else. So shock. There also was some excitement because I did grow up wanting to be a mom, and I was like, okay, I mean, it's just happening sooner, and I'll make the best of this.
We want to empower you to make fully informed choices about your pregnancy and parenting options. Let's talk about what's next now that pregnancy has entered the chat. Welcome back to Pregnancy Has Entered the Chat. Today we have Leah Outten on the podcast. Leah is the author of The 16th Year, a birth mother in a fully open adoption, and a mother of 5 whom she parents with her husband. She is a speaker and passionate advocate in the adoption community. Today we're going to be talking about open adoption as Leah shares her story. This is a topic with a lot of misconceptions, so I'm excited to share this episode today and for our listeners to be encouraged by your story of open adoption. Leah, is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners before we get started?
Well, there's so much to share. That's a great nutshell of who I am. I also had a teen pregnancy and became a mom at 19. So I've lived both, and I just have a heart for just women in general, as you were saying. And so I hope that, that it'll encourage people for whatever their path is on in this conversation today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. And I loved your book. I have it right here, The 16th Year. If anybody out there is walking through with somebody who's going through an adoption or just themselves thinking about it, it is a really awesome read. It's so well written. And I really loved just getting to hear your experience. So we're going to dive into it today, but I would definitely recommend picking up a copy of The 16th Year. So take me back to when you first found out you were pregnant with Kaylee. What emotions did you have?
The first emotion, I think, was shock because you never think it'll be you. It's always somebody else. So shock. There also was some excitement because I did grow up wanting to be a mom, and I was like, okay, I mean, it's just happening sooner, and I'll make the best of this. But then the fear settled in of, oh my gosh, couldn't even afford the test that I just took. What is my parents going to say? What is, I wasn't dating her biological dad. We had just broken up. We weren't really together. What is he going to say or do? Is this going to move us toward the path of, healing and parenting together? Or is it going to be really difficult? It was just a lot of questions and a lot of unknowns and a lot of fears. So, I was really grateful to have a friend with me that night and just have support. I think that's so important in this journey. Whatever path we take is just having that support person. Yeah. So, that first night. It was a lot of mixed emotions.
Yeah. I love that you touched on both the excitement and the nervousness, because I think for a lot of people, they feel so torn and don't know how to sort through those emotions, because it really is, and a lot of time can be both. So I just love that you said that, because it's so many, whether you're expecting to get pregnant or not, whether you're planning it, whether it's totally unexpected, it's the emotions of a pregnancy test they're very scattered. So I love that you shared that. And then we'll talk through kind of some of how you sorted through those and how you went through your decision-making process. But I just think that permission to feel all of those feelings is so helpful. In the book, you talk about your decision-making process and how you felt you wanted to parent, but eventually felt God opened your eyes to the path of open adoption. What was that experience like, and how did you wrestle with God in that decision?
Seeds were planted of faith. I would go to church with my dad when I was visiting him every other weekend. We would listen to Christian music in my mom's home. There were little seeds planted. So I knew of God. I knew that he loved me, and I was... even the year or so before that I found out I was pregnant, was really exploring some of that more through youth group and just this looks like something that I want to experience. And I think that's wrapped up into my adoption decision because it's not an easy decision. It's one that is really, I would say, sacrificing in a lot of ways, and so is motherhood. Motherhood absolutely can be too. But it's one that you're facing grief and loss with, even if there are benefits to everybody involved too. But the adoption decision, I really was set on parenting because especially this was almost 22 years ago now when I found out I was pregnant, all I knew was closed adoption in my family, wondering, what does she look like? Does she think about me? Does she care about me? Like having all these questions. I never wanted my child to think that I didn't love them or didn't want them, because was far from the truth. And so I really felt like parenting is what I have to do, because abortion did not feel right for me. I felt like she had purpose in this world, and it wasn't for me to decide that. So I chose, I want to walk through this pregnancy. But in that process, talking to teen moms online of what to expect and what challenges there are, what, resources, there's all kinds of hearing what is life like in your shoes. And then I did the same for birth moms. And that's where I saw open adoption being modeled, with adoptive moms and birth moms really coming together and loving this child, but also loving each other and having a friendship and really growing their family, not just through this child, but through the birth family too. And that just blew my mind, and it opened and softened my heart that adoption could be an option for me to consider more seriously. And so once I saw what that could look like, I thought, if I can have a relationship like that, then I think I could do adoption, because it really felt like it had both of the things that were really important to me, which was helping her to have more stability in her life if she's a better start to life, that father figure, Christian values, all the things, but also being able to be a familiar face to her, and be here to continually reassure her, I love you. And so I chose adoption at 7 months. And that was also a day where I surrendered my life to Jesus and just really trusting him with her life and with my life, and really felt clearly, open adoption is what you need to do, and just to trust me and I'll bless it. And that's what he's done.
No, that is so beautiful. And you said a couple of things that I'd never heard it said that way before. Like you said, you're growing your family not just through this child, but like through this adoptive family that's now like going to be a part of your life. And I think it's just so beautiful, because we have a lot of women here that come here and they may be like, you bring up adoption. We're big advocates, like your parents were telling you, like go over all of your options, like get the information and really figure out like what you feel led to do. But a lot of people think adoption is, you never have a relationship with the child, or even people have thought that it's similar or the same thing as foster care and things like that. And, how your family is going to react to it and all those things, but a really beautiful testimony that you have of God leading you. I just think that it's such a beautiful story and how God has brought so much good from it. But I just really loved how you said that, of like growing your family not just through this child and those biological mirrors, which I'm sure we'll talk about more, but I just love that you were able to like see that path and that you went down it. And I'm sure people want to hear more about like, what was it like making that decision at 7 months, and how did, it feels like you have to make a decision right now sometimes whenever you get that positive pregnancy test. So we can keep talking about this, or if you have anything you want to say on that, just like what that timeline of decision was like, how you spoke about, I think it was a social worker in the book that you were meeting with, and they gave you the profiles of the families. But yeah, what was that like? Did you feel that pressure to make a decision right away? And
I would say it's really normal and good to take your time. You want to not rush into any decision. And so I feel like in weighing your options of, parenting or adoption, it gives you time to really explore what does this look like, and the different variations of what adoption can look like. And, you get to choose the parents. You're considering, where do you want them to live? Do you want them closer to you, or do you want them, further away? Like, considering how often are you communicating? How are you communicating? Do you want to have visits? Do you feel like that would be too hard? And so I met with a social worker from very early on in my pregnancy. And I love that I really had no pressure from my social worker or my parents. Like, that was really helpful in my decision, is to have peace with this as being empowered in my choice. And that helps me to walk through the hard parts of adoption every day. But it was helpful to hear from the people living in adoption. That's what changed my mind. It wasn't the pamphlet. It wasn't. That's one reason why I shared too, is just to have another like real person perspective of what it can look like. But I would say take your time, think through, talk with other birth moms, talk with, it helped me to hear from all sides. And I always encourage that whether you're considering adoption in the sense of you're choosing to adopt a child, educating other perspectives is really, really important and helpful of what it can look like, what works well, what does not work well, what we're seeing in that. And it's okay to take your time. And having worked in adoption now for many years, I would say it's really normal and encouraged to take your pregnancy to really consider what's the best decision for you. And it's very often that's sometime in the third trimester.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love that you said it's encouraged to take that time, because I think a lot of people, understandably, big decision to make, need that time. So that's really amazing. One thing that I read about in the book that I really loved, because something we do here, we do like a pregnancy 101 class, but you talked about something in your book where your family friend threw you a Leah Shower, and that it was like supporting you as you walked through this adoption and gave you like spa gift cards and postpartum care stuff and just things to really help you settle in after that adoption placement. And can you talk a little bit about that? Like, would you recommend that to other people that are supporting a birth mom? Like, that's just a really beautiful idea, and I would love to hear more about it.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I always forget that detail because it was my last month of pregnancy, and so you're filled with lots of different emotions of physically uncomfortable. There's excitement of like, we're going to finally meet this baby and what she looks like. And then also the fears and the grief of all the things that are ahead. So for them so my parents, I think my stepmom, organized it. And the thing I would not advise is a surprise one.
Yeah.
Because of all the emotion, that was
Yes.
a lot.
I'm
But
sure.
like I just immediately started crying. It was just a few people. It was like my stepmom and my nanny, and some neighbors. It was just really neat to have these adult women in my life are like, hey, we see you, we love you, we want to celebrate you. We know this is not easy. And I love that, really honoring that. Normally we would be having a baby shower right now and be celebrating this baby. And we still want to do that, but in a different way that honors the path that you're on right now. I definitely recommend something like that, whether that's before the baby is born, and sometimes I've seen it afterwards as well, maybe a few months down the road, where they just come together and love on her and, give some gifts to help get some postpartum clothes or some books or, crafts or whatever she's into. I was a part of one where they gave her luggage so that she could take it on her open adoption visit. So like when she went to go visit her son and things like that. So I think it's, I would recommend it. And I feel like we need more.
No, that is so beautiful. And I think of all these organizations, like we, are located in Greensboro and Winston-Salem, and we do things like, not things exactly like that, but things to help moms here, and even organizations like Embrace Grace and places like that do these baby showers. Like, we really should start incorporating those more, because I just had a baby last year. I totally like all the things you need postpartum. It's like, oh, like I need a new wardrobe and all these things. And then of course, with the added layer of grief on top of that, you just need people around you. And so I love that you shared that even before the baby's here or after they're born, like doing at either time. Of course, with the mom's permission, but I really love that idea.
One thing I want to add too is I think people forget that birth moms are literally having a baby and recovering physically and emotionally. And you forget that another person is grieving and recovering on the other side of it. So whatever we can do to help honor that and to support her in that recovery is something that I'm seeing is not normal, and it's missing in the healing. And that has lifelong impacts from what I see, like in birth mom communities and retreats of the grief that they're still carrying because that wasn't validated or cared for. There needs to be more of it. So I love that you're touching on that too, and hope that helps. And for me, I feel like that was a huge part of my healing journey, was having people like that support me and love me through these really hard parts.
It's so good to just like reiterate, because I think, I mean, we talk about postpartum a lot, just in like moms in general. It's like postpartum's so difficult, but when you're also having that emotional layer on top of it, like it's not fair for that to be forgotten. And so I think that that's really beautiful. And but talking about that grieving process, your counselor gave you a soda bottle analogy for grief that I thought was just like a really apt example and helpful for people to put a picture to the words. So could you explain that to us a little bit?
So after she was born, my social worker came to visit for a postpartum check-in kind of thing. And she really encouraged me not to let the grief be bottled up. That, as with the soda bottle analogy is, if you have the lid on and you start shaking and shaking and shaking, it's eventually going to explode, especially when you try to let a little bit out. And that just really stuck with me as well. It's one that I still use. So she just really helped me to think of some healthy coping tools of, how can we navigate this grief and this story that I'm walking through at that point. So for me, writing was what I used, and obviously still write today. Yeah, so just really being able to find whatever is helpful to talk about your feelings, to express it, whether that's through music or art or nature or whatever it is, but finding things to slowly release those emotions. So that's it's applicable not just with adoption, but with anything.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And like you talked about with the shower idea, like giving books, or like trying to maybe like intermingle those of like what's helpful to you right now, or even if they don't know what's helpful to them right now, like giving them a book and a craft kit and all these different things that can kind of like doing things with our hands or like using our minds can be so helpful in like processing something even in the background of everything going on. So I really love that idea. And was there anything that your mom did for you or your friends did for you that made you feel really seen and validated in the midst of pregnancy and postpartum?
To be honest, some friendships fell away in making an adoption decision. So that was hard because they did not understand. But I did have friends, and I made new friends too that God brought into my life that were very supportive and loving and just there with me regardless. And I would say my mom and my parents were the same way, of just loving me for where I was, whether that was a good day or a hard day, or just feeling like just that grace of, I know this has been a really difficult season, or I may not have agreed with XYZ of what led you here or any of these decisions, but I'm just going to love you for who you are. One example was my teacher that I wrote about in the book, who gave me the card that said "Bloom where you're planted." And I still hold on to that too, of wherever God has put me, that I can still grow and bloom and make something beautiful out of it. And so that was really encouraging in a time of like, I see the beauty in you and I see the beauty in this situation. And it doesn't feel like it right now, but you will be okay and you can bloom.
No, that's really beautiful. And I wanted to touch on that too, because now I think something that's so encouraging about your story is that you're 22 years out almost like from finding out you were pregnant. And so I think a lot of women look at it and they're like, okay, maybe open adoption, I could do that right now. But then they think, what's that going to look like in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years? And I think it's so cool that you've walked through all of Kaylee's adolescence and, teenage years. And now she's a young adult, like, just as her birth mom. And I loved you shared in the book, like she came and spent a summer at your house and different things like that. But I know that there's difficulty in it too. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about like how God has led you through like the beauty of an open adoption, but also the difficulties just over the last 20 something years.
I would say it's mostly been beautiful, and the beautiful parts are what has really helped cope through the hardships and the challenges and the grief. But I still have all these incredible memories that I do get to make with her. So we have kind of a bucket list of things that we want to do and have done and got to experience together, and all of that just makes it worth it. And for me, where we are now, 22 years later, it's far greater than I ever imagined it would be, which is typically how God works, right?
Yes. Yeah.
He knows the big picture and the best plan, and it may look different than what we think it should or what we think in general. But his plan is often far greater. And so, 22 years ago, I think I would have been happy with my 2 visits a year, one for her birthday, one for Christmas time.
Yeah.
And our updates and things in between that. And like, that's the bare minimum. But the fact that her parents quickly above and beyond, and that they wanted us to have a really close relationship too. They cheered on Kaylee and I having that relationship and wanted to support that in whatever way she wanted and needed. And Kaylee's desires, I want to follow her lead, but they're often so much of what I wanted to. And so it's just neat to see how God has aligned that, and her parents being supportive of that too, because that her being shared back with me in such many ways that many adoptive parents honestly would think would be really scary to do, because of just the stigmas of birth moms and things like that. But they were so willing to lean into what she needed. And so now she's an adult, and it's everything that I hoped for, but was, cautiously like, that would be really cool one day. But now we're living it, and that we've worked through some of the awkwardness that can come with adoption, of where she's my daughter physically, biologically, but there's still, I'm not there every day. So her mom and Kaylee have more of a closer intimacy of hugging and, cuddling and things like that growing up. Whereas that was really awkward for Kaylee and I, even if we wanted that. So we've had to overcome things like that, and just learning how to, and I would say this happened more her teenage years, and being able to work through the awkwardness of like, do you want to hug? Do you not want to hug? Do you, is this something, I don't know, just figuring out who we were as people, and how we come together during visits and things. Like, is it okay to introduce you as my daughter, or would you rather me call you something else? Finding all that out. And then also just being, as her birth mom, as I said, like I have motherly instincts towards her because I physically grew her, but she's not mine in an everyday sense. And so there's that also, withholding and respecting her withholding my, just knowing that my role is different, and I have peace and I'm good with that. But I also, and just being respectful of her parents that I chose for her, and trusting with things if there's a decision that I maybe wouldn't have done as a parent or whatever it may be. And I think that's where God has worked in all of our lives, to really trust him through this process and through the relationship of knowing when to step in and advocate for ourselves or for her. It's been beneficial to all of us, but I loved how it's helped her most of all to have all the pieces of her story and the people in her life who love her.
I just love hearing like how you kind of work through it in a day-to-day sense, because like you said, those motherly instincts can be so strong, and I can only like imagine kind of how all of that shakes out when there's more people that love her, and just even having your own like children that you parent now. I'm sure that's like I don't know. I could just imagine all the tensions that come from that, but that God is working through it in just such a beautiful way. Remember in your book, you wrote that contract of, we're going to do these 2 visits per year at least, and updates in between, like for the mom that's looking into adoption. Can you talk a little bit about that process and how you held those hopes in the same way of wanting to like protect yourself a little bit?
Yeah. So in finding a family, I was really thinking, if I could parent, who would I want to be? And so what kind of life do I want her to have? And for me, I really modeled that after my dad and my stepmom family, and just a strong Christian foundation, just loving, has fun traditions and lots of family members to be in her life and to love on her too. And besides that, really wanting her to have this open adoption and for them to value that too. I grew up with mostly just my mom and me, and I was lonely, and I wanted to make sure she would have a sibling. And I also wanted to kind of see how they already were parenting, and if they were walking through adoption, how they were already living that out. And so, all 3 profiles I looked at fit those basic requirements, but the very first one was the one that God used. And first thing I noticed was that they looked like my dad and my stepmom in a similar way of like, so I was like, maybe she'll blend in with them. And then we had the same kind of dog. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah. So you just never, I don't know, you know how God is in the details, and that dog was in the details.
That's awesome.
And so, but more than just like, okay, they look the part, it was, you could tell their character and their heart through the words they wrote to me in that letter. And then once we met in person, it was so clear. And it, for me, now that I'm married, it is similar to the feel of, oh, I found my partner in this. Like it felt so at peace, and it clicked, and it just organically felt right. The peace was my anchor through every decision, and this was another moment of that. And then when I shared that in the book that I had already named her Kaylee Ann, and I matched with this family, and I'm like, hey, I've already named her, and this is really important to me. This is who she is to me. Would you consider keeping it? And the name they had chosen was Kayla Ann. And so those little details were just a big part of God affirming this is the right family, this is the right path. And so I, pray for other moms to experience those kinds of things too.
Yeah, no, that is so beautiful. And the the verse that says, like, if anyone lacks wisdom, like, let him ask God who gives generously. I just think of that for your story of you praying, like, please show me the way. Like, I want to do the best thing for her, do the best thing for me. Like, I want this to be a beautiful situation. And the fact that he gave you those little, like, God winks almost of like, you're on the right path. Like, I pray for that for anyone walking through an adoption. Like you were saying, that's just like the peace of God in that, I'm sure, is so huge and just such a big decision. You wrote a letter to Kaylee, like on one of your, like, you were like 9 months pregnant, I think, and you sat down and wrote this letter. I just wanted to ask about that because I also love writing. It's like a cathartic thing for me as well. And, would you recommend that to moms who are also about to deliver and about to place for adoption? And then have you ever given that to her? Is that something that you kind of keep for yourself? Just like, was that helpful in your healing and processing everything?
For me, I wanted to write that letter almost just in case of if for some reason this relationship goes south, she'll have this letter to know my heart and my love for her. That makes me emotional. I remember sitting at the kitchen table. I had typed it up to get it perfect and then hand wrote it on some purple flower paper. And I gave her that handwritten one to her family. And I know that they have a box tucked away with all this kind of memorabilia stuff. And I know that because her brother, who was adopted, that one visit, they pulled out the letter from his birth mom. Again, I could see their character of like, these things matter to them. So she does have a copy of it. It was helpful for me to kind of pour out my heart of, this is why I'm making this decision. This is how much I love you. This is why I chose your family, all those kinds of things. And it's kind of that releasing process too. You're writing it and releasing it. And so it really was kind of almost a prayer over her in those moments too of like, okay, God, this is my heart. I'm going to trust you with it.
I think about just like the surrendering process of that, and also the hopes that you have for your child, and like the things that you want to see them, love and have joy and all these things. And even like my son, when I was pregnant, I wrote him a letter, and he's in my home every day, but I wanted him to know those feelings that I was having for him, and just the hopes that I had for him, and like the way his dad and I, my husband and I love him. And so I think that's a really awesome thing to do. I'm just thinking of like, if I was in this situation, or anyone out there that's in this situation, I bet there's going to be people that are just like, how did you go about this? Or what did you do? And it was hard in this way. But I would love to talk through some of those resources now of just like you mentioned, like the birth mother retreats I've seen on your social media as well. I think like, what are some of those resources out there for birth moms that are walking through this?
Because of the internet, I did find a good birth mom support community and some retreats to go to that were really life-changing for me. And while some of those have fizzled away, there's many more that have popped up throughout the country. But even groups online, there's many virtually that meet, on Zoom and things, once, twice a month, just to have that community and just know that you're not alone. I think that's one of the biggest things. And I would say even as a young mom, but also as a birth mom, like there's kind of that isolation because we're a little bit different than where we are, than other people in our age or whatever. And so just being able to find people who really understand of like, yeah, I get it. Like your stories can be different, but the core of it is I really understand how hard this can be and also how joyful these updates or visits and things can be too. So Brave Love is a really great one. And they have a whole resource section for birth moms of retreats and groups, all kinds of things like that. Adopt Match which sounds like a matching site, which it is, but they also have resources. And I love that they have groups and retreats, but they also have adoption competent therapists, which is really important because if you're struggling with adoption and you're going to a counselor who doesn't understand the trauma that can come with it and the unique hardships that come with being a birth mom. Ours particularly is called the Ampersand Initiative. And so as we started this podcast on about just acknowledging the both and that it can be, it's okay and validating to honor the grief and the joy together. And the last one we had in May was so powerful you could literally just see kind of the shackles come off of women just by being in this space and validating this experience. But I wanted to touch too on Embrace Grace. From what I know, they also do, if you choose adoption, they do a celebration as well if you choose adoption. Really cool. So it's, I love that Amy, the founder, was very intentional about wanting to honor whatever path that God was taking her on. And so I know that they do that too. When there's a baby shower, they celebrate her and as equally,
So we ask all of our guests this, but I would love to ask you, what is your why for serving women in the capacity that you do?
For me, it was while I was loved through my journey and supported, I want other families to feel that too, other moms, because that is what brought me to Jesus, because I experienced, it truly was his hands and feet through the people surrounding me. It's changed what I do for my job. It's changed everything. And so I really hope whatever that looks like in other moms' lives, other adoptive parents' lives, that we're, seeking him and making decisions, even if they're uncomfortable and even if they're hard, but if we have the joy of the Lord and the peace that surpasses all understanding, that he will carry us through.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I just loved getting to talk to you. And I just want to say thank you for what you're doing, because I feel like adoption, especially probably from the birth mother side, you could walk through your life, kind of go about things. And it's just really cool that you're creating a space for people to come together and meet other people. And I love that you had that and that you wanted to go turn around and go ahead and recreate that. So thank you so much for the work that you do. And thank you for coming on today and getting to share that with our listeners.
Thank you for having me. I've loved your questions. I love podcasts always come at different angles and pull out different pieces of the story. And I loved that you touched on things that not everybody touches on. So just thanks for a great conversation. I hope it inspires and encourages the work that you guys do and whoever's listening.